Welcome to this week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. As per usual, a big thank you to everybody that watched last week's episode of the show, liked, commented, all that kind of stuff. Very, very much appreciated. If you're a new viewer to the show, then lovely to have you along. Please subscribe to the channel and carry on watching if you like what you see. If you've been around for some time, you know, just like I have, then thank you very much for sticking with me and putting up with my waffle. Anyway, this week's episode of the show, we certainly won't be having any conversations about ABV, or the lack of it, should we say, and chill filtration, because as you can see from the title page, we are looking at Ardnamurchan, who make whisky properly, as they say, just like it should be, with note taken out, as they say, just to coin a phrase from a very popular advert from when I was younger, and if you're as old as me, you'll probably remember it. But anyway, that aside, so as you know, sort of Ardnamurchan are like a number of distilleries that kindly send me samples every time they have a new release, so a big thank you to Graham at the distillery for the samples for today's episode of the show. Obviously they don't all tend to come at once, so I have to diligently collect them together until I have enough for an episode of the show. So these releases do span some time, just I think about a year or so. So yes, a big thank you to the distillery for sending me the samples. Obviously a number of distilleries don't tend to do that these days, costs and all that kind of stuff, but Ardnamurchan, whenever they send me an email, or Graham, whenever he sends me an email, he knows full well he's going to get a reply saying, can you send me a sample please, along with the order, I hasten to add. Yes, it's all symbiotic, as they say. Anyway, so I don't think I need to say an awful lot about the distillery, apart from one of the samples for today's episode. It's the 10th anniversary release. Where the hell has 10 years gone? I mean, I had that same feeling with with Aaron. I remember sort of, when I first started, Aaron was a new kid on the block, and then suddenly, bang, it's been going for 10 years, and you think, where the hell did that 10 years go? But anyway, so yes, we'll be looking at the 10th anniversary release, which I'm really looking forward to, along with some of the other releases, including the new Mezcal release, or the Mezcal Cask release. I mean, that was a bit of a left field one. I certainly didn't expect the distillery to be mucking around with Mezcal casks, and you probably think, well, Mezcal casks, fairly light kind of stuff, but the reality is that actually, when you think about it, Mezcal is a really pungent spirit, so it's just like ex-sherry casks, and we have one at the end. I mean, look at the colour of that. I mean, whoa. Burnished gold or burnished copper, I think would be the correct terminology for that. Possibly a complete sherry monster, but we shall find out when we get to the end. But anyway, as I was saying, so Mezcal casks can impart an inordinate amount of character, so you have to be kind of delicate with them, shall we say. Anyway, considering they do things the right way, as they say, I don't think we'll have a problem with that. But anyway, no need for any further waffle. I'm just going to introduce today's lineup. Right, okay, so I'm going to kick off with the... it's a shame they kind of stopped doing the batch numbers. I really liked the batch numbers. I mean, I know they were releasing them because it hadn't they hadn't got a sort of consistency, because like a lot of distilleries, I imagine they were playing around with cut points and fermentations and all that kind of stuff, and so a lot of the early spirit was, shall we say, experimental, but I liked them, but anyway, that's just a side. Anyway, so the first bottling we'll be looking at is the AD Sauternes cask release. This was from late 2024. It's 8-year-old unpeated spirit. Now, as you probably know, or you may not know, if you don't know the distillery particularly well, they make unpeated and light moderate peated spirit, and then more often than not, certainly for the core bottlings, they vat them together, generally around about a 50-50 match, 50-50 blend, but they do obviously sort of bottle the peated and the unpeated spirit separately. And so in this instance, it's 8-year-old unpeated spirit that's been finished for 30 months in ex-Sauternes casks, so that should be really interesting. Bottling number 2 is the 10th anniversary, the AD 10th anniversary edition. By the way, the Sauternes finished with bottled at 50%. This is also bottled at 50% and came out late 2024. Obviously 10-year-old, again unpeated spirit, aged in a combination of bourbon casks and Paul Lanois champagne barriques. So always loved the champagne, the Paul Lanois release. Only get a handful of bottles of it, but ooh, that's good. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. Bottling number 3 is indeed the brand spanking new Mezcal cask release. Again, limited edition, only a handful of bottles, bottled at 55%. So this is ex-bourbon cask peated spirit. The spirit was peated to 30 parts per million, which is, yeah, reasonable, and finished in ex-mezcal cask for just over a year and a half, so not too long, thankfully. Bottling number 4 is the AD Rum Cask release, bottled at 55%. This is the classic peated and unpeated spirit, which came from 2016/17, so 6 or 7 years old. Finished for 2.5 years in ex-Jamaican rum casks, and this was from December 2023, I believe. So going back a bit on that one, the penultimate bottling is another relatively new release. This was from March of not March of this year, but January this year, I think it was. So this is the AD Madeira cask release, the 2025, bottled at 52%. Again, a blend of peated and unpeated spirit, 57% unpeated in fact, and 43% peated spirit, aged for a minimum of 6 years and then finished in ex-Madeira cask. Don't know how long, but I'm guessing probably about a year or maybe a year and a half possibly. As you can see, the colour is, you know, reasonable, not too heavy. And then we're on the Sherry Monster. Did I say Sherry Monster? Yes, so this is the 2024 Sherry Cask release, bottled at 50%. It's again peated and unpeated spirit. Don't know the blend of that, but I would guess somewhere close to 50-50. And 100% sherry matured, both Oloroso and PX casks. Don't know for how long, but probably about six or 7 years, probably the same as some of the other bottlings. So yeah, that should be an interesting one to finish with. So let's kick off with the Sauternes, the lighter end of the spectrum, shall we say. Right, okay, so let's start with the Sauternes finish. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Quite dense, plenty of that sort of late harvested Sauternes character, vanilla, cinnamon, barley. It's always I always get this sort of weird feeling when I kind of, you know, nose unpeated Ardnamurchan, because it's just, I don't expect it, because the sort of like the distillery bottling is kind of features peat, and it's always, I mean, I love it. I mean, it's a lovely, malty, rich, dense spirit to start off with. There's a little bit of a minerality there, that the honey has got a lovely fragrance to it. I mean, it's working really nicely with the Sauternes, it has to be said. A little earthiness coming through as well. Touch of coffee, possibly. Little. So the minerality is almost saline in character. I think the distillery actually is right out on the west coast. So I think it's right out on close to the coast, I believe. So it probably does get a little bit of coastal influence. So that saltiness is kind of working in nicely with the minerality. Anyway, let's sort of pass on. That kicks off with the Sauternes cask, so it opens up with that lovely sort of honeyed apple, apricot, barley, straw, vanilla. In comes the malt on the mid palate. The alcohol is really emphasising the minerals and the saltiness on the aftertaste. Again, it's got that lovely sort of weight to it, a little bit of citrus notes as well. It's just overall beautifully balanced. It doesn't need any water. I'm going to put a little drop just to see what that does to it. I mean, it will probably lengthen it a little bit, I think. A little bit more straw coming out now, so a little bit more denser, less aromatic, more richness, more rich honeyed character, a little bit more Sauternes character, I think. Still a lovely sweetness. Let's see what the palate's like now. Sweeter, more Sauternes, longer, more barley. It's got a dry barley husk finish. That's stunningly good. Not too sweet. That's what I like about it. Some Sauternes cask finishes can be quite sweet, but that's got a lovely balance to it. The sort of the citrus, the minerality, the alcohol, all just kind of balances that up really nicely. So, good starter. Okay, so let's move on to the 10th anniversary edition. Let's see what the nose gives us on this one, shall we? Fragrant, aromatic, straw-like barley, toasty French oak, little potpourri, wood smoke. It's got a lovely verve, a lovely intensity. Again, minerals, slight saltiness, apricot, cooked apple, vanilla. Sort of vanilla, almost vanilla cream, not creamy vanilla, but vanilla cream. A little grilled nuts. There's a touch of almost kind of leesiness from the champagne barriques. Oh, that's really complex. It's got that lovely kind of soft rose petal, youthful note that comes through as well, which just doesn't seem 10 years old. It has to be said. It's just absolutely gorgeous, really nicely balanced. Yeah, that's got a lovely complexity. Let's see what the palate's like. You really can taste those champagne barriques. They've got that leesy, winey, sort of champagne-y kind of note, which mingles in with the malt, the barley, the straw, the apricot, a little bit of sweetness, vanilla sweetness, wood spice, apricot, mouth-watering citrus, minerals, a little bit of salt. Really long, really beautifully spiced on the finish. The spices are not too bitter there, and they're not too sweet. They're just about right, said Daddy Bear. I think that's what he said. That is absolutely gorgeous, it has to be said. I mean, like I said, that it's just so balanced, and I think that is the key with Ardnamurchan. I think sort of the master blender at Ardnamurchan, and I forget his name, so apologies for that, it just does such a beautiful job of blending together and use the finishing and judicious use of finishing casks. Absolutely fantastic. I'm going to put a little drop of water. It doesn't need it at all. Certainly, although it's 50%, it's just, you don't need it. It's absolutely drinkable without that. A little bit more American oak coming out now with water. It's a little bit more floral, possibly. Like I said, doesn't really need it, but it's brought out some more of that American oak, a little bit more creaminess. See what the palate's like now. Still quite leesy, youthful, relatively speaking, which is unbelievable, really. I mean, it just goes to show that Ardnamurchan is going to be able to mature for decades, really. A little bit less complex, again, a little bit more oak, a little bit more American oak, a little bit more creaminess, possibly. Like I said, don't think it really needed water. It certainly hasn't harmed it. Personally, you know, I think neat is absolutely fine. stunning, absolutely stunning. So let's move on to the AD Mezcal cask release. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Right, well that's interesting. It's got that kind of fresh, crisp, pulped white apple, vegetal, peat, astringent mezcal. It's not as funky as you might think. It actually all really works together quite nicely, and there's a sort of a kind of, dare I say, a Colila kind of feel to it. It has that sort of old school Colila, you know, because I remember old school Colila having that kind of real kind of sort of garden fresh, garden peas, green fruit kind of character before it became far too oily for its own good, I think. But there's a lovely robustness. There's a honeyed note underneath there, or not honey, sort of a richness of fruit. Green apple. That works really well. I mean, that is bloody good. It is not funky. It's not too weird. It just works. It's just integrated, and if you didn't know that was a mezcal finish, and you were tasting it blind, I think you'd be surprised. You wouldn't have picked it for a mezcal. But when you know, you can sort of see it, if you know. Anyway, let's see what about that. Again, there's this almost honeyed sweetness. Dry peat. It's got a real dry peat character. And there's a subtle mezcal influence, the pulped white fruit, the astringent green fruit, a little bit of almost kind of green spices, brine, a little masked, I would say. There's a little dryness, that dryness of peat kind of like lingers right the way through, and it's got an almost kind of chilled hotness on the aftertaste. It's really sort of tingling my tongue, it has to be said. A real intensity, it has to be said. Okay, so it's more sweet barley on the nose now. The mezcal cask influence has dropped off quite a bit once you put a little drop of water with it. So again, neat is absolutely fine, I think, for the nose. Let's see what that's like. Again, less mezcal cask, more ashiness. Almost a little bit of roasted meat there, right on the aftertaste. A little bit longer, a little bit fuller. It works both ways. So it's however you like your poison at the end of the day, I think. Personally, I love it neat, but you know, I think sort of with a little drop of water, it's still really very, very good. So another quality whiskey, I think. Okay, so let's move on to the AD rum cask. So 2.5 years in ex-Jamaican rum cask. Let's see what those gives us on this end, shall we? Straight off the bat, lovely rummy sweetness. It's got that kind of broad Jamaican juicy sort of banana-y kind of plantain kind of soft fruit rumminess. A little bit of earthy peat, a little bit of coffee. A little bit, there's a slight astringent sort of herbal note running through it, a little bit of toffee, mineral. Again, really nicely balanced, although the cask influence is quite noticeable. And you, like I said, I mean, you stick your nose in the glass and you go, oh yeah, that's a rum cask finish, a old rum cask finish, as they say. But again, balanced, it's not too far into the rum, as they say. Short pass on. Again, it opens up the sweet rum cask, but it's not too sweet and it's not too intense. And then in comes that sort of ashy, herbal peat, a little bit of smoke, minerals, salt, and then it gets kind of a little bit agricole-y on the finish. It kind of works in with that kind of peated note, and again, real lovely spiciness on the aftertaste. mouth-watering. The intensity of the alcohol just really ramps up those spices, and that is just absolutely gorgeous. Again, I must admit, I can understand why Ardnamurchan has become one of my favourite distilleries, and certainly given how sort of popular it is, sort of, you know, it's become quite a favourite with a number of customers, because the whiskey is just so bloody good at the end of the day. A little bit softer, a little bit more almost agricole-y, fruit notes, less peat, a little bit more barley, a little bit more vanilla. I mean, it's often the way once you put a little drop of water with peated malts, the peat does kind of drop off a little bit. I think I prefer the intensity of it neat personally, but again, it works. So that's that. Again, like the nose, less peat, more sweet rumminess, still has that lovely kind of mineral and salty aftertaste, not quite so spicy. I'm not getting that tingling on the tongue now, as we said. So, I mean, again, it works really nicely with water, but I think for the full Ardnamurchan character, you've got to go neat, as they say. Okay, so let's move on to the 2025 Madeira cask release. Let's see what notes gives us on this one, shall we? Again, really nicely balanced. I'm getting that kind of stewed plum and biscuity Madeira. A little bit of barley, some ash. Not as much peat as I would expect. I mean, it's... what was it, 43% I mean peated and so 57 unpeated, but so it's kind of lessened the peat quite considerably. It's not as edgy or as raw as some Madeira cask finishes can be, and it's again not too Madeira heavy. I mean, the Madeira is noticeable, but the spirit is also noticeable as well. A little citrus, a little oxidised fruit. Yeah, nice nose. Let's see what the past like. Kind of opens with dry Madeira fruit, so I'm guessing these casks were probably Cercial, possibly dry Madeira. I'm not getting the sweetness of I'm getting oxidised fruit, but I'm not getting the sweetness that you would get with, say, something like a Malmsey or something of that kind of style. A little bit of salt, chocolate, barley, again nicely balanced, a bit short. Not a great deal on the aftertaste, not a great deal on the finish. It does kind of close off quite quickly, a little bit of ashiness, but even though the Madeira cask influence is not huge, it does seem to be the sort of overriding factor on the palate, and sort of almost kind of subtly overtakes it, shall we say. Going to put a little drop of water and see if that brings out a little bit more of the spirit character. Not a great deal of change on the nose. It's still quite biscuity, still quite sort of off dry, I would say, from the Madeira characteristics. So it does again kind of puts me in mind of a Cercial Madeira finish, I think. Let's see what the part like. A lot less peat, a lot less Madeira. It's kind of, yeah, it's okay. I mean, the trouble is, I think with all the other bottlings so far, that the bar has been right up here, and this just hasn't quite hit it, which is a shame. I mean, it's still a lovely whiskey, but when you set your bar that high, you've got to hit it every time, and sometimes you're just not going to get it. And that's no sort of disrespect to Ardnamurchan, it's still a lovely whiskey, but it just doesn't have the complexity or the wow factor of the other releases, it has to be said. So, good whiskey, but could do better, which is what often used to be scrawled all over my bloody school report, as we say. Okay, so let's move on to the final whisky of the afternoon. This is the 2024 Sherry Cask release. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Sherry, treacle, tar, rubber, raisinated fruits, chunky, astringent herbal oloroso, green nuts, potpourri, menthol. Yeah, it's not my bag, as they say. I can see it appealing to an awful lot of you guys that love the sort of big, chunky sherry monsters, but this again really doesn't have the light and shade. It's all into the sherry end of the spectrum. I mean, it's got a lovely combination of Oloroso and PX. You get, like I said, you get the herbal green sort of Oloroso, the treacle from the PX. So if sherry cask whiskies are your bag, then you're going to kind of love this. For me, it doesn't quite have the balance. Let's see what the part out. Yeah, big, rich, treacly, tarry, quite a bit of peat in actual fact. Bonfire kind of burnt wood, dry peat, earth, masked, quite intense. I mean, it's only 50%, but it tastes an awful lot more. And it, like I said, I mean, you could look at the colour of it, and you know that instantaneously screams sherry at you, and you're thinking, whoa, there's not going to be an awful lot of bloody distillery character coming through from that kind of pounding, it has to be said. And it doesn't. But, I mean, you know, every distillery has a big sherry monster because there are customers that love the big sherry monsters. So you have to kind of pander to those poor souls every now and again, I suppose. Again, not a great deal of change. We're still in the big sherry end of the spectrum. It's not suddenly kind of lightened up and suddenly I'm getting lots of distillery character. It's just kind of, yeah, sherry. Let's see what the part out. Yeah, still quite sherry, still quite dry. Less peat now. It's a little bit one-dimensional. It's a bit too. Well, it was a bit one-dimensional without any water. It has to be said. But it's a big sherry monster. It's lots of dried fruit, raisins, blah 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 blah. I mean, no sulphur. Quality casks that have been used, it has to be said. And like I said, it's basically aimed at customers that are not me. You know. The guys that sort of love the big sherry kind of character. I mean, and every distillery, like I said, makes a whiskey, generally speaking, to pander to those poor souls that sort of, you know, need this kind of stuff. You know, for me, the other bottlings are just far more indicative of where the distillery's at. But yeah, I can understand why they have released that particular bottling. So yeah, quality-wise, can't argue with it. Stylistically, not my bag, as they say. So let's sum today's episode of the show. Firstly, a big thank you to Graham at the distillery for the samples for today's episode of the show. Without the support of distilleries and producers and things like that, obviously there wouldn't be an episode of the show, and it kind of goes hand in glove to a certain extent. It's not all just about sales, it's about promotion and just basically sort of, you know, saying, look, you know, the distillery producing great whiskey. And the Sauternes cask bottling, just classic, really nicely balanced, not too sweet, not too much Sauternes. It adds that sort of lovely sweetness to it, but it doesn't overpower the spirit. And that to me is just completely up my alley, as is the 10-year-old. The 10-year-old I thought was very special. I mean, it's kind of come and gone, I know, but I mean, if you can pick it up on the secondary market, if it's still available, pick yourself up a bottle, because you know, it's again just beautifully balanced. You know, you distillery character, you get the champagne cask notes coming through. I just think it's just just something really unique and really intriguing, and just an all-round beautiful whiskey. The Sauternes cask, I think, worked really nicely. Not as funky as some Sauternes cask. Mezcal cask finish worked really nicely. Not as funky as some Mezcal cask finish. Nicely handled. The sort of master blender has basically kept an eye on that, it has to be said, and just made sure that it didn't go too into the dark side. And I think, you know, hats off, beautiful, beautiful whiskey at the end of the day. The rum cask, I love rum cask finished whiskies. They just appeal to me, and this one again was beautifully balanced, not too heavy on the rum cask. Yes, quite heavily influenced to a certain extent, but not overly influenced. Nice amount of rummy dried fruits, but I still got the distillery character, and it's all about the balance at the end of the day, and that I thought was absolutely gorgeous. The Madeira cask, again, I thought was okay, and not quite up to the the high standards of some of the other bottlings that I've just tasted today. Finish was a bit, and it, yeah, I mean, it was okay. I mean, sort of nothing wrong with it. Just within this sort of kind of lineup, it just shows you that sort of, you know, some of the other bottlings are just a little bit, for me anyway, a little bit more impressive. And the sherry release, I mean, you know, it is what it is at the end of the day. I know there's a lot of people, like I said, that will love that kind of bottling, but for me it was a little bit too heavy on the cask, which is not a surprise considering it was 100% matured in sherry. So yeah, like I said, Ardnamurchan has become a really favourite distillery of mine, and a go-to distillery if you want a really intriguing, balanced, complex whiskey. And yeah, hopefully it kind of continues. So yeah, and I hope you guys will kind of, if you've never tasted a bottling of Ardnamurchan, buy the sort of the core release, because it's just kind of a really good whiskey at the end of the day. So yeah, that's each episode in the bag. It has to be said. I know what I'm doing next week. I was just about to say I have no idea what I'm doing next week, but I know what I'm doing next week because I've got it kind of already lined up. But anyway, you'll just have to wait and find out until next week. But anyway, hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of the show. I've kind of rambled an awful lot because yeah, it happens. Good dramming and good afternoon.